the book that I wrote talks about all the various entities and energies that can cause us to be depressed, cause us to commit suicide, cause us to hear voices. It's a big, big world out there in the spiritual world.
Through unique sharing from amazing souls around the world that will help you feel more inner freedom, clear direction, and inner strength to do what you have come to do. Enthusiastically Spiritual's mission is to help inspire more enthusiasm for you to follow through with your heart's desires. If you are inspired by this podcast and would like to help support it, please feel free to follow the show notes that say, support this show. Thank you so much and enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Enthusiastically Spiritual. I'm your host, Teresa. While we exist here on the planet, we all experience duality. This duality shows up all around us like day and night, sadness, happiness, depressed, enthusiastic, and many, many other ways and forms. My guest today has expressed and embraced dualities through his Torn Between Two World books. And he is here today to shed light on how to increase your spiritual strength and increase your resistance to the negativity that you are subjected to. His name is Shawn Murphy. Shawn received his Bachelor of Science degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Minnesota in 1982, while working part-time as a machinist for Ramar Engineering. While working part-time as an engineer for General Dynamics Fort Worth Division, he completed his Master of Engineering from the University of Texas at Arlington in 1985 and his Master in Business Administration from Texas Christian University in 1989. Following the stroke of his 20-year-old daughter, Shawn was inspired to write the trilogy Torn Between Two Worlds. Since then, he has been actively blogging on Quora, where he has been able to assist many on their spiritual path. Following the successful launch of his most recent book, Shawn has become a spiritual consultant to assist others with their spiritual growth. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It's wonderful to be here today, and I'm very excited to explore these topics that have, come to me through many journeys in my life.
Well, I would love for you at first just to share a little bit about you and your spiritual journey with the listeners.
Well, thank you. As you're reading my biography, you can see I always worked and studied throughout my entire life, really starting at a very young age. And I've continued that, ever since. I'm an entrepreneur. I run 2 different businesses, but I spend the same amount of time studying as I did when I was in college. So I'm always active learning. And one of the most important things that I've studied throughout my life is myself. I've been on many journeys of self-discovery. And this is how I ended my latest book. It's the greatest study that I think anybody can do, is understand better who they are, understand your talents, understand your shadows, your weaknesses, and concentrate on growing your gifts to their fullest potential, and just being aware of your weaknesses. A very good friend of mine said, and I use this quote a lot, he said, if we spend all of our time trying to overcome our weaknesses, the best we can ever be is mediocre. But if we spend that same time furthering our gifts, we can become extraordinary.
Love that so much.
So I had my first spiritual awakening when I was 14. I grew up in a very strict Catholic household, and I'm an engineer. I have a very logical mind, and I just said, if God made this, then I should be able to understand what these people are telling me. And the first part of my journey was trying to understand religion. I had studied 18 different religions by the time I was out of college, and kind of gave up the journey there because I came away with the impression of this elephant and the blind man. And, the truth is the elephant. And then you have all these blind men, which are the religions, that have a little piece of the truth, but a completely different understanding. One thinks it's a snake, one thinks it's a wall, one thinks it's a tree. And that's the view that I've taken all along. And it's one that has allowed me to really open up my heart to everybody. There's nobody I don't talk to. There's nobody I don't love, because we're all part of the same truth.
Totally agree with that.
Yes. You mentioned in my biography also, 5 years ago, my 20-year-old daughter had a stroke, and this was a very interesting experience for our family. I say it's interesting because the impact it had on me is my daughter lost her ability to speak. It was a stroke in her speech center. I came home from the hospital. I sat down on my computer, and in 6 months, I wrote 3 books.
Wow.
I gained my voice when she lost her voice. And these 3 books, they came with me into this life. They just came
part of
very,
you.
very easily. Yes. And then, as you said, I went out trying to publicize my work, and I found this wonderful platform, Quora. I say it's wonderful because it's the only platform today where people aren't broadcasting, their monotone ideas. It's a question and answer. People are asking questions. People are answering questions.
Nice.
And it's a very, very good platform for people searching, especially in our world today, where there's a lot of monotone voices out there, but people have questions. And as I was answering questions in spirituality and religion and history on Quora, I came across a lot of people struggling with mental illness. And they realize, as I did, that most mental illness is of a spiritual nature. In the world of modern medicine, my wife had a valve replacement surgery done, and the cardiologist told her that the success rate is 97% of this surgery. I mean, modern medicine's great in the mechanical areas, but what psychiatrist will give you a 97% chance of being cured from mental illness, right?
Not many.
Because they don't have the right tools. The book that I wrote talks about all the various entities and energies that can cause us to be depressed, cause us to commit suicide, cause us to hear voices. It's a big, big world out there in the spiritual world. There's a lot more of them than there are of us.
I'm filled with chills you say that, Shawn.
People forget that, the reason that science hasn't been able to analyze the spiritual world, and I'm a scientist from my background, is because you're a blind man trying to analyze a sentient being and do tests on it. You can't. You have no idea who's talking to you, what their motives are, what their allegiances are. And, there's a lot of people working in the spiritual space nowadays that don't realize how many mischievous spirits there are out there misleading them.
Yeah, I go to a lot of metaphysical and psychic and paranormal events, shows, expos, and I often am very flabbergasted as to how much other people out there who are sharing their skills or services are unaware of exactly what you're saying, Shawn, because the work that I do with my husband with TNT Spirit Works, we work with what we call confused energy or confused souls. And these are souls that are between the worlds and different levels and different variations. And they are everywhere affecting many of us, especially those that are very unaware. And like you said, the bipolar, the depression is so prevalent in society because there's so much energy. I'm not saying that's all of it, but I believe it's 99.9% of it, honestly.
Well, yes, yeah, it is. I get so frustrated with this point because I've done a lot of interviews since this recent book was released, and met a lot of these practitioners that you're talking about, and they're very passionate because they've gone through a life experience that woke them up. And what they're doing is interesting, it's great, but they haven't addressed themselves yet. But they're out trying to help others, but they haven't addressed themselves. And that's why I said at the beginning that the most important thing that I tell people to do is figure out what's happening in your life. What are the impacts on your life? Clean up your own house before you try and help somebody. I started helping people after my 5th spiritual awakening. I started writing about it after my 4th. But that's who I am. I'm reserved. I'm not somebody who goes out and screams from the highest mountain. It took that long, but I think by the time I started helping others, my spiritual self was perfect, but I understand my shadows. I understand my darkness, and when it pops up, I'm aware of it. I don't let it clobber me from behind.
And that's really important. And to me, as you're talking about that and other people out in the world doing their services, spiritual services and things, what I've noticed is that the people that, of course, we're all different levels of consciousness, right? We're all different, unique vibrations, different places. We've had different experiences this lifetime, many other lifetimes. And so people that will resonate with someone won't resonate with me, the clarity or where they're at. And so I oftentimes, that's why I look at all the different variations of people out, exploring and sharing spirituality and what they're doing in the world. And it's great that there are so many people at different levels. I agree with you, though, that, there's an understanding that needs to be really understood at this level of what we're really experiencing energetically and with the confused energy and souls and whatever you want to call them, being possessed, whatever, that definition is for you and I and the listeners. But there are different levels and that consciousness out there. And so it's meeting people. So the people I see that I will just say are not that clear with where they're at energetically, people that aren't clear and are in the place are meeting them. So it's all a resonance too, which I know you understand.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a call, and especially now where, yes, there is so much confusion on the planet and souls that people have no idea. No idea. It's almost like mind-boggling that, my God, they're everywhere and people have no idea. They're just being interacting with and they're being affected by. So let's talk a little bit about that. About is this some of what you call spiritual afflictions, or is that a different thing?
No. It's spiritual afflictions is a large area, right? When there are spiritual energies created by people, okay. And if you've seen Dr. Emoto's work, for example, he demonstrates the impact of thought and emotion on the material world, on water. So those energies, that you can just be walking through the neighborhood and people they're jealous of you, they're envious of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that has power, that can just kind of sit on top of you, and you carry that home with you into your house. And if you're not conscious of that you can build up this negative energy in your house. What it does is it makes people short-tempered, right? And it builds up, and it can cause just negative actions of the people living there. I mean, that's one spiritual affliction. It's in my book, I give various ways on dealing with that. Just regular rituals that you can use and bringing positive energy into your life. Emoto's how to water process is a very good way to deal with that. And just consciously thinking positive energy of joy, of gratitude, of love, that can negate that negative energy. The other spiritual afflictions are from sentient spiritual beings. Okay. Negative energy is just not sentient, it's just there. It just causes issues, right? But the sentient ones are sometimes the most difficult, because they have a reason to be there. My book was dedicated to Will, and I tell a story in my book about his affliction, which is a past life affliction of vengeful spirits who followed him into this life. And he was treated for many years as a schizophrenic. As you know, schizophrenia occurs in the 20s. Schizophrenia does occur in childhood. And there's a spiritual law behind that. So you don't take revenge on children, you take a revenge on adults.
Ooh, filled with chills on that. And it's interesting too, because that's when bipolar shows up.
Yeah.
It shows up right in your 20s, early 20s.
Yeah. And that's when you pass into adulthood and you start paying your dues, as it were, from a spiritual standpoint. And these are sentient beings who have an axe to grind. And they're very hard to get rid of. People call them demons because that's the picture they have from, The Exorcist and other movies, that this is an evil spirit. There are those too, but the worst ones are the ones who have the right to extract revenge. And they're the hardest to get rid of. But I've, again, in my book, I've got a number of different strategies for dealing with it. There's not a quick fix. There's not a pill that's going to get rid of it. And that's what many schizophrenics have come to realize, that the pills don't help. But by working on ourselves again and raising our own vibration level, we can resist these vengeful spirits better. I won't say we can get rid of them. The only way you can get rid of them is get them to forgive you.
And what we say in the work that I do is that once they're done with me, my food and lodging, they'll go find someone else unless they go off.
Well,
So it's that food and lodging thing.
but those are more the what I call the lost spirits, who are there for a different reason. They're I think the movie Ghost had a very good example of the ghost with a cigarette, right? They're looking to satisfy an addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, sex. They are molesting people to try and satisfy their urge. And so they prey on drunks, they prey on drug addicts to encourage them to do more, right? And so that they can partake in the spiritual aspect of the spirits. And there is a spiritual energy in all of these alcohol and drugs and so forth that the spirits can partake in. A good friend of mine has spent her life conversing with the dead. She's a clairvoyant, and I remember when she first got her gift about 25 years ago. She was always questioning, why are they all coming to me? What do they want with me? But she started publishing some of her work here recently. But what she said is the biggest complaint that the lost spirits or the past spirits that she has talked to for the last 25 years is that they don't teach us. They never told us what's going to happen. They never told us what the afterlife is going to look like. Nobody knows. It's funny. She was writing a story. She was on the train, and this spirit said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, telling the story about the spiritual world." He said, "Nobody's going to read it. Nobody's going to believe it."
Wow. Like, yeah, right. Most people aren't going to believe it.
Yeah. But the viewpoint is there. The ones who did believe it didn't hang around, right? The ones who are lost because they weren't prepared. They didn't know what they should be doing. They're the ones who hang around.
So, Shawn, how did you come to this realization about this? Because for myself, I went and did a spiritual, like a camp one summer in 2017, and I was guided to go to this what we called trance healing work. And it was all about releasing and sending back, souls that we've either known in previous incarnations or that are around us or whatever, right? But before that, I didn't know. I'd been doing spirit mediumship. I've been doing trance healing work, channel work. And so I had no idea. So what brought you to this? Because this is a whole other level of spirituality. I mean, seriously, this is like, a high level of understanding of what really energetically is going on the planet. So how did you come about this?
Well, I said I've been at it for 48 years.
But was there like one time where like things came out and you're like, what the hell's that? And you had an understanding, or?
No, it really came from a research standpoint. Like I said, I had this logical mind, and I was trying to understand what happened to religion. So I went back through the history of the church and the churches and so forth, and got back to a place as an engineer and as a scientist, which I found very intriguing. And that place was, in between basically Homer and Socrates, the Ionian Greek culture, the culture who gave us Euclidean mathematics, gave us Pythagorean theorem, gave us the Hippocratic Oath, who gave us logic and reason. And I was intrigued because, as a scientist, that's where Galileo went to rediscover science. It's where Erwin Schrödinger went when quantum theory came about. And, when you think about it, these are people who lived 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. And what they said is still valid today. Their theories are still valid. And this intrigued me because if you've read Socrates, he's the father of logic, but he talks more about God and the gods than he does about logic. Okay. And so when I moved to Europe, I discovered this group who was researching, these great minds, and came to understand that the reason why Pythagoras was able to come up with what he did is because he was a holistic person, right? He was a musician. He was a healer, and he understood harmonics and through his holistic view of the world, he and others like him started to understand the spiritual laws that go behind the laws of nature. And if you understand the spiritual laws and you correlate those with the natural laws, then you found something that is permanent. As they did, they found these really basic laws of nature at that time. And I mean, that's where it started. But then I went to my first spiritual retreat 27 years ago. And I just finished last week my 27th one.
I saw those beautiful pictures in Switzerland and Europe. I'm like, oh, are you there right now?
Yes, that's, I've spent a week each year for the last 27 years.
Beautiful.
Talented clairvoyants with mediums. One in particular who has brought 35 years worth of teachings to this world about the spiritual world. And talked about all these issues of what you bring with you in a past life. And it all makes very, very clear sense. With if you know the work of Ian Stevenson, he's demonstrated the physical attributes that one can bring from one life to the next. And he hasn't expanded it to the mental and the spiritual attributes that you bring from one life to another. But they're there. I mean, he showed the physical, but obviously the mental and the spiritual also are brought from one life to the next.
Which is pretty amazing. And I'm sure for a lot of people, hard to understand too. But I get it. Because I've had many past life experiences and, things going on in my body and basically I say all realms of my body, body, mind, spirit, and in different variations, different places. I was in Germany my last lifetime, went back over there as a soldier this lifetime, and had 3 years of, I can probably say, experience a lot of negative energy, a lot of probably energy from that other lifetime that was on me because I was drinking and doing all kinds of really bad, inflicting things upon myself. So yeah, it's interesting that how we do bring so much forward into a new body when we come back.
And the one thing that I focus on in my book is the relationships we bring with us,
Mm-hmm.
both positive and negative.
Without a doubt.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we're here. That's what we're doing here, is we're trying to clean up those relationships. We're trying to become virtuous again.
Mm-hmm.
And
we say that with a nice smile and a little.
Well, no, I say that because I had this discussion with my wife over the weekend, and she said to me, well, what am I learning in this lifetime? And I said to her, well, I've learned nothing but patience in this lifetime. and she knows all the things that have happened to me regarding patience.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, you're learning something different, and you've got anger that you have to get rid of,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important that you get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had lots of opportunities to overcome it.
Over and over, right? we don't learn them; they come back. And it's interesting too, because I know for my husband and I, we've been waiting a couple of lifetimes to come back together. So we've been together maybe 2 or 3 lifetimes back, and then many other lifetimes too. But the things that we brought back in to work together on, that's what I think is interesting too with relationships and the karmic, things. And some of it's cleanup, and some of it's just really that, where are we at as souls, and now moving forward into the work we're here to do, and et cetera. So, and everyone's different, like you're saying with your wife and you, but it is interesting taking that relationship aspect too to that level, because that's really what, like you said, we're here to learn and grow. We're here to be in relationships, and some of it is cleanup. Some of it is expansion, coming together to expand our soul's essence. And I do believe, like you said at the beginning, that, we are one. We're just different variations, unique energies, unique vibrations. But, what I see in you, I have in me. So,
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of the spiritual world, is the diversity, the vast diversity,
Mm-hmm.
but yet a oneness,
Mm-hmm.
but completely diverse.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. It's chilling, actually. I mean,
It is.
I was gifted a old soul, and I tell people the greatest mentor I've had in my life is my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Because like the Tin Man, she helped me find my heart, among other things. And she's taught my wife more than my wife taught her. Mm-hmm. And I can say the same for me, but different things. And that's the interesting part, is how we help each other. Because she came here to help us.
Mm-hmm. And you all contracted to come together to do whatever healing and understanding and expansion together. So it's interesting, because I've met someone recently I was talking to. I'm trying to think where I talked this person at. Oh, it was someone I was interviewing. And so this person had a sister that had a son die at 10 and a son die at 21. And so, but they have a bigger spiritual understanding about it. And even the first son that passed on came to them and said, this is the reason why the other son is no longer here, and a bigger spiritual picture. So, and they really embrace the fact of energetically what they are learning from that situation, how they all contracted to come in, and they look back at the boy's life and say, wow, we saw how much they did in their life because they weren't going to be here very long. So it's so complex, our souls and what we've come to do. And but it's so beautiful too, in the learning and experiences that we're all here to embrace.
Yeah, the first thing I wrote in my life that was of any meaning outside of schoolwork was on September 17th, 2001. And it was about the stories that I just heard, the people who missed the train, the people whose alarm didn't go off, who weren't there, and the amazingly small number of people that died relative to what could have happened. And I wrote an article which got printed in the local paper, and it was talking about who dies and who doesn't die, who survives the plane crash, who doesn't, based on what I've learned through the many experiences that I've studied. And the funny thing was, it wasn't funny, but a year later, Oprah did a 1 year after, and they brought in the survivors of people who died, and they brought in some of the people who survived. And it's exactly what I wrote.
Wow.
The ones who died, they were ready. They knew. Everything was clean. Right. And the ones who lived, they realized they need to do something different.
100% agree with you. Yeah.
They were saved for a reason. Their alarm didn't go off because they
wasn't ready, wasn't time.
Yeah.
Believe you 100%, Shawn. Yeah. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about your beautiful book. So this is The Torn Between Two Worlds. This is the fourth book you've written in this series.
Yes.
But they're on different subjects. And this one's on modern medicine and spiritual healing.
Yes.
Would you like to share a little about that?
Well, the first three books were basically philosophical. The struggle between religion and science, and trying to find a middle way, between both of them, as I have. And then the struggle between rhetoric and wisdom, and how do you find wisdom and avoid the rhetoric that is so prevalent in today's society. And the third one was the struggle between the material world and the spiritual world. But these were all, philosophical, essentially. Having worked with people on Quora, it was them who encouraged me to write a self-help book, which was way outside of my comfort zone. Really, although I've been through spiritual training by two different spiritual healers. I've done, I understand all of the pieces, but I've never used it for anybody other than my immediate family. And so, I have in my family people who were diagnosed with ADHD and put on medication, with anxiety and put on medication at the age of 12, and and none of that ever worked. And in the end, what they did was really a spiritual awakening, which helped them to overcome what they're originally being treated for. So, this is the topic of the book. I mean, the first half of the book is about, defining the various ailments that you can have spiritually, kind of what I've talked about a little bit before. And the second half of the book is about the various healings that you can use, all natural, all some ritualistic, but all with a lot of research. And basically, I've taken the life works of many, many people, and put it together in a useful handbook, and all in the in memory of Dr. Edward Bach, if you know who he is. His little book that he wrote was called Heal Thyself, little tiny book. And that's what this is about. It's more about yourself than anybody else will ever know. And so the best thing I can do as a writer or as a doctor is help you, give you the tools you need to heal yourself. Right. And so that's what the spirit of this book is about. Now, in some cases, some of these severe schizophrenic cases or suicide type of cases, they need help from the outside. And so I give tools to the people around such people that they can help. Not necessarily intervene, but just help guide, and bring positive energy to a place of darkness.
Well, it sounds like a much needed book, Shawn. And I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with myself and my guests and my listeners and YouTube listeners, because this is a really big subject and a topic that right now is just timely for all that we're experiencing and all the negativity and the energy and the confusion that's going along around the whole planet. So I thank you so much for coming on, and share with everyone how they can get a hold of you.
Well, you can find me on Quora, just Shawn Murphy. I created the spaces on Quora called, one is the spiritual world, which is one of the largest spaces. I'm a big contributor to the space called the afterlife. And then you can reach me on my website, which is just torn between two worlds, all written together.com. Feel free to reach out to me, because the gift that I seem to have is there's nothing that you can say to me that I will laugh at. I have a affinity for misunderstood people. And I have to admit that the greatest joys I've had was when people told me, "You're the only person who's ever listened to me." And I think that's a big problem in raising children, because a lot of parents, they project an image on their child, but they really don't listen to their children. And that's a part of my book is raising spiritual children.
Oh, beautiful. And I'll have all those links in the show notes. So if any of you listeners, watchers want to connect with Shawn, please do. So again, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Enthusiastically Spiritual. Wow, was that deep? Was that profound? And Shawn is on an amazing mission to share with people out there like you how important it is to understand about the energy that we're all being affected by, having to walk through, having to be experienced with. So there's a lot going on in the world that of the unseen that a lot of us don't recognize. So I hope you do check out his book. And again, check it out in the show notes. I'll have all the links to meet Shawn and to find his information. So if you've not subscribed to this podcast, please make sure you do, or the YouTube channel. Make sure that you hit subscribe, like, and please share freely with other people that you know that may want to hear the important information and the important message that come through each and every episode. Also, if you'd like to support this podcast, please look in the show notes and you will find support this show. And I would appreciate any support that you can give me and this beautiful show. So until next week, just remember that life is too short to not be enthusiastic about your unique journey.